And welcome back, motherfuckers, to episode 2 of Tusk, where the world is going to shit and we are kicking back and enjoying the show. Here today, we welcome back Marquis, who y'all will most likely remember from episode 1, and we'll be introducing another guest who we have, who is also an old buddy of mine. We will be referring to him as Mr. Picasso in this episode. Welcome, Mr. Picasso. Would you like to introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of your background.
Thank you, Tusk, for having me on here. And of course, I guess a little bit of background that I have on, I guess, why I should even be on this podcast to begin with, I guess you should say, or why this podcast specifically. The topics that are being discussed here, as far as what's going on in the world, politically, geopolitically, philosophically, um, within multiple layers of basically the human species and how we interact and power and things like that. Um, I've basically always studied these things ever since I was a little lad, little little kid. It just intrigues me, man. It just does.
Hey, that's as good a reason as ever. And like I said, we have our guest Marquis back on air, where hopefully we can have a very productive conversation between the three of us. And let's get the shit started. The first topic is a very recent event, unfortunately, a tragic natural disaster in the state of Florida, Hurricane Ian. I haven't gotten around to finding the official death rate so far, but I've heard that it's into the dozens. So, unfortunately, most of them being in the southwest, west coast, around generally, I believe, the Tampa area. I may be wrong on that.
Yeah, I think the death rate now, as if an hour ago when I checked my phone, was at least 62.
62. Damn.
Yes, at least 62. And I
Hurricane,
believe is
that's
also
not to
category
interrupt,
5.
but CNN is now reporting at least 109 people have been reported killed by the hurricane.
Yeah,
109.
there we go.
Damn.
So that's just within a short time.
It's a Cat 4. I can't remember. Marquis, do you remember if it ever hit Cat 5?
I do not specifically recall, but what I do specifically recall is that it was immediately politicized by the left and used as a cudgel to bludgeon Governor DeSantis.
Right, yeah, I caught a lot of that on the news too. Picasso, what are your thoughts on that specifically? What are your overall opinions on Governor Ron DeSantis?
So DeSantis is somebody that I've been tracking for a very long time, and he's kind of some sort of unicorn in the Republican Party. And let me explain. Of course, Trump, he's the biggest unicorn of the Republicans, but he's completely changed the Republican Party. And Republicanism kind of had this foul mouthed taste to it within the general public that, at least if you watch just the media, would make you assume. Or when I've had personal conversations, people just have this thing about Republicanism being a Trump thing now, which it is turning to. But DeSantis seemed to be somebody that was not a Trumper, that was a DeSantiser. I think Vegas even had him in the polls 2 months ago, more likely to win the presidency, even the Republican nomination over Trump.
Really?
Um, yes,
Yes,
so
I'll,
he's been very popular. So I've been tracking him for a while, and I've had an eye on him, and especially within the state of Florida. He's known probably for one of his biggest things, the "Don't Say Gay" law,
Right, yeah.
um,
That's what they
which
try
was
to
a big.
that's what they tried to relabel it as, at least. Even though the word gay, well, one might say that it's kind of fitting that the word gay wasn't even in the bill. However, that is what the Democrats tried to. Actually, a lot of Democrats were even in support of it, but many people on the far left relabeled it as the Don't Say Gay bill, saying that it's restricting free speech in schools, etc., etc.
I can
But
give you one word on the reason why the media reacted in that way, and that is Disney. Okay,
That's
because
fair.
what this no gay law was, what this bill that was passed was basically it was a big tax for these corporations like Disney. So Disney was not paying their taxes as a separate because they were claiming to be a separate state
Right.
from Florida. So Florida said, "No, you're part of Florida. Florida stamp. Oh, and by the way, you can't be indoctrinating children with this homosexual acceptance type agenda that Disney has had as of recently, as to them wanting to be more open." So you could see that. So the left took that as it's anti-homophobic, and the right's like, no, Disney deserves their fair share of taxes. But we obviously see what the mainstream narrative was at the end of the day, which
Right.
says a lot. Which
Absolutely.
says a lot about the power of that one word, Disney.
That's true. Yeah. Disney has always had a very large cultural influence all over the world, really.
And that's
Which,
why I want to point out DeSantis. The that's why I want to point out DeSantis, because he's proven that he can roll with the punches. He votes for his constituents. He does what they want. He most definitely appeals to his base, but with his own flavor. He's not a flamboyant Trump. He's not somebody that you see in the news making a bad comment,
that's
but
true.
he's proved that he can roll with the punches. Watch any interview with him. Um, he's very keen in everything that he says, and he's proven to be a leader. Even just his time management of not being able to go onto the View, a chess move that was. How people so you have this left, so everybody knows of the show The View, right?
Yep, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, right? Because it's a terrible show. It became very political. McCain's daughter was even on there. What, basically started as Whoopi Goldberg and some housewives turned into we're going to, say whatever we want, and we're educated all of a sudden with no backup to any of that.
If anyone listening to this podcast doesn't know what The View is about, first of all, lucky you, and secondly, I will completely sum up every episode for you. A bunch of rich, privileged women go on a show and bitch. That's it. That is the entire show. They bitch about shit they don't know about for how the fuck long are the episodes? I don't even fucking know. That's the entire show.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's basically Oprah times five,
Yeah, basically.
and it's not uplifting,
Right.
so it sucks.
Yeah. Marquis, do you have any comments on that? Ron DeSantis, the Florida situation, Disney, The View, any of it?
Yes, back to DeSantis a little bit. There were some polls done at conservative conventions in the past few months. I specifically remember one at a Turning Point USA where DeSantis was either shown to be very competitive with Trump, and in some, he actually polled ahead of him. And these TPUSA polls, these other right wing conventions, and all that, this is really important, especially for the primaries coming up, because this is showing where the energy of the Republican base is. And it's showing that Donald Trump doesn't have the monopoly on the right wing base that he used to in 2016 and 2020. That monopoly, that mystic power he
Right,
had, it's
right.
not there to the extent that a lot of people out in the media, out in the commentator world, seem to think it is. So going forward, there really might be a battle in the primaries to see who's going to win. Is it going to be Trump? Or right now, it looks like the only other person who could possibly touch him with a 10-meter cattle prod is Ron DeSantis. But here's the thing, they both, when you get right down to it policy wise, DeSantis isn't more than a stone's throw away from Donald Trump. This isn't like the 2008 election where we have like Ron Paul running against Senator McCain back then. The gulf between the neocon McCain and libertarian Ron Paul, I love Ron Paul, but that's beside the point. is about the gap between Tokyo and Los Angeles. So the Overton window, the
Very true.
range of acceptable opinions in the Republican Party, it's not as wide as it used to be in that respect because it looks like it's an argument between Twiddly D and Twiddly Dum. But that's another thing that I wanted to pivot to, and we were talking about earlier that there seems to be a chance for real realignment in the Republican movement because the power that Trump had over the electorate is, like we said, kind of broken right now. So
Right.
the question is now, where where are we going next? What does it mean to be a
Yes.
conservative in 2022? Are we
I,
going to revert back to neoconism, or are we going to go towards the libertarians? I hope we do. In fact, I hope we go towards the anarcho-capitalist wing of the libertarians. That's just my radicalism.
Right.
Or are we going to choose something totally different? I don't know. And it's a very exciting time to be alive, and the right wing libertarian politics work.
Indeed, it is. That's something that I have really noticed is as similar as most Republicans are policy wise, the Republican Party has become very shattered, but the shards are very, very close, even touching in some aspects. In fact, it seems that it's become two different political parties for the most part. It's
yes.
become, you have your never Trumpers, very pro
Right.
Trumpers, and then,
Right.
Right.
people who could give or take, which that's very a very small minority. Most people either love Trump or hate him.
Let's
But
point out
And
that
now we've
Trump.
got,
however, I've seen a few different polls, and most polls I've seen show Trump in the lead for Republican primaries in polls. However, uh, with the whole Mar-a-Lago raid and the January 6th debacle, it does seem like his grasp has slipped, but has increased tenfold among people who
Mm,
already support him either way. Some
right.
people think,
that's true.
many Republicans believe he was raided by the FBI, he could be a real criminal. Others believe that is a huge injustice and weaponization of law
Yeah.
enforcement. So,
Those aren't mutually exclusive. It can be both.
right,
I would argue that most Trumpers believe that I'm referring to a group of people as Trumpers, believe it or not. But that the people that follow Trump, I would say a majority of them, up to 90%, believe that the raid was unlawful, that it was a
absolutely.
huge power within the deep state and it was out of balance. And how dare you do this to an ex-president? So, but yeah, there is a break off between Trumpers.
There
But
really
I
is.
do want to bring up some important thing because Marquis was saying that it's an exciting time to be young and to be a right winger right now. And what are we to do? What is the because Trump doesn't have his pull, and I'm going to make the argument on the opposite, and I'm going to say Trump very much still has a huge pull. And I'll give you an example just from my state in Missouri. Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley is now a do or die Trumper, and Trump endorsed him. So we're seeing the people that Trump is endorsing they they win first off. That's a big deal because it says a lot about what the people think. They win. Two, these guys that were winning, maybe they were some of those Republicans that were sometimes Trump, because Trump, he can go to a sometimes Trump and he can make him a Trump, no problem. And they become Trump and they're all Trump and that's what they preach to their constituents. It's like you can tell that Trump is giving them the template to win. He's saying, say these things, do these things, vote for these things. And they're winning. They're winning and he's endorsing them. And I think the Congress is still very flooded with a lot of Trumpers right now.
Definitely. And that's why I hesitate to say that his grasp on Republicans is loosening, because I believe the biggest reason why his grasp might be loosening is because of Ron DeSantis. Because Republicans see DeSantis and they say, hey, Trump already lost. He has a lot of baggage carried with him. Maybe we should turn to somebody new, somebody fresh without all
Right.
that personal baggage.
Right.
However, they will not hesitate to back Trump with no
Look at
other options.
DeSantis. Okay,
After
this
all, I
is
mean,
somebody that,
DeSantis was endorsed by Trump.
yeah, and like I said earlier on the podcast, this was somebody that I've been tracking, and you could see his mannerisms and his at the very beginning of his term as governor, the way that he would politicize himself to the way that he's politicizing himself now at peak attention. He's taking stuff from Trump all the time. He's doing the mimicking of his political adversaries, giving them nicknames, mocking the news. He became famous for that during the Corona vaccine and the Corona lockdown. Back in those 2 years of the government shutdown, he was a big no masker. Florida is a no masker. People from California come to Florida and be free. He became this guy that bullied the left wing media too. Is straight out of Trump's line, you know. So we see how he's changed and evolved to be a Trump in his own manner, but he's a more controlled temperament Trump.
Definitely.
Indeed. One of the things that I have seen that both Trump and DeSantis use a lot is that it's an appeal to populism, which is a very old
Yes.
philosophy, has very deep roots in the American tradition, but
Is it morally
Trumpism,
right?
that's another question right there. But
Yes. I
the,
think it's the only morally right way. Well, it depends on how you define populism, though. We can
I'm
get
talking
into
about
that.
as a political ideology, not a tactic. Like this
Like a
populism.
definition.
Okay, this is a appeal to the people against the power of, well, historically it was against big business. You see this with William Jennings Bryan and his crusade against the gold standard. You will not crucify America on a cross of gold. And it could also be diverted against big government. That's one of the things that Trump and DeSantis are latching onto. But at its core, it's a groundswell of the common man against some powerful, seen to be oppressive force in society. We've seen a metamorphosis from that powerful force being in the past, in the 19th and the early part of the 20th century, the progressive era I'm talking about, that used to be
Right.
big corporations, the trusts, busting the trusts, Theodore Roosevelt, Sherman antitrust, all that. And now it's being directed against government. But here's the thing, though. Populism as a political doctrine is very light on actual doctrine. That's the thing. There aren't too many people who will go out and write a tract about it. Same cannot be said about classical liberalism, socialism, conservatism, even though conservatism takes most of its quote unquote doctrine, such as it has, from inherited tradition and history. That's why there aren't as many tracts on conservatism as there are on socialism, which is a purely doctrinaire philosophy. So without this bedrock, this base of doctrine, a framework for thinking, and a framework for future political activism, populism is by its nature an intrinsically unstable philosophy, and it's why the original populist movement collapsed, I would argue. It's unsustainable because people can't pass on the ideas as well as you could pass on the ideas of libertarianism, socialism, conservatism, syndicalism, anything like that.
Well, because
Doctrines that haven't been written. It's
I mean,
unstable.
Right, because
it's a lot. I think a lot of different variables on the reason why it's not as popular. It's not as extreme. That's one thing. Humans are very particular about their extremes. They want the specifics. You know, Either you're a master of your job or you're a loser, like this whole thing, right? But I think what we need to be asking ourselves is why is the power getting more to the populace now? Why now? Why at this moment? What led up to this moment?
I,
You
re-
know,
I really couldn't answer that
20
last
years in the
question.
Middle East. and the business cycle.
Oh,
I would
so
say I'm talking about it as far as the sensory and politics from this way forward. I think it has a lot to do with technology. I think it has a lot to do with capitalism. Uh, the common man now, as Marquis said, was gaining a lot of power, and I think that has to come through the capitalist type, materialistic type of nation that we live in. How many houses have flat screens now? Right? So all three of us have a computer. We're interacting with each other. We're spreading ideas. People are doing this more now than they ever have before.
that's true.
I
That
think
is very
that
true.
has I
Indeed.
think that also has to do a lot with it. But if anybody else says something.
Well, it is hard for an ideology like populism to become as popular as, say, Marxism or capitalism, because, after all, populism is a very broad ideology. It doesn't have a Karl Marx or an Adam Smith. It, I mean, any
Precisely my point.
Exactly.
Right.
Any
Right.
ideology can claim to be for populism. You take Karl Marx, he says, well, I'm fighting for the common man, make everybody equal. Take capitalism, well, we're letting everybody define their future and create whatever lifestyle that they want to live. Anybody can call themselves a populist.
Indeed. One of the
Right.
dangers we stray into with populism when we just look at historically what populists have been for. Again, doctrine wise, we're kind of out in a gray zone because as far as populist doctrine, there is no populist doctrine. Just go by what they've done in the past. What have they done in the past? You've got Williams Jennings Bryan crusading against the gold standard. Why is he doing that? Because he wants to inflate the currency. The original populists in this country and around the world more broadly, inflationism and crank monetary theories are a common strain through all of populist thought. I shouldn't even say that because populist thought is a little bit of a misnomer, but populist action, let's call it, historically they're in favor of growing the currency supply. I in order to help debtors mostly and paying off debt and all that. The difficult thing is that inflationism doesn't actually work. The very bad economic theory. We really need to avoid adopting that, and so far we haven't done a very good job at avoiding that because Donald Trump was the biggest spender in U.S. history, and Joseph Biden is probably going to surpass him at the rate he's spending right now. Just today, Fox News reported that we crossed $31 trillion in the federal debt. So that's all nice and peachy. And this is, of course, being financed quite a lot by the printing of money. The printing press goes burr, as the popular meme goes.
I was
Yeah,
just about
Biden
to say.
already surpassed Trump as the biggest spender in human history.
Did he really?
Really?
Yeah, he
Excellent.
already did.
That's
So
great.
Trump already was. And
We're
we
we're not
we
even
can get a
halfway
fact
through his
checker
term.
going.
We're not even
But
halfway
yeah,
through his term.
Biden is only 2 years in, and he already surpassed Trump. And a lot of that has to do with the COVID relief bills,
Peachy.
the stimulus checks. He's not keeping the Federal Reserve in check. He's not. And you see his weakness. He's literally tweeting out to the oil companies or tweeting out to the Federal Reserve, "Oh, you better listen to me." And then
He
what do? And they're like, "No, fix your stuff with the Federal Reserve." The oil company says. The Federal Reserve goes to Biden. No, you passed this bill. We got to freaking get this money. Got to print it out. Where do you think money comes from? He just doesn't understand basic economics.
Well, according to AOC, money comes from trees. That's why banks have branches.
Oh my
Hey, you
God.
know what? That's a good one.
Yeah, I
That's a
saw it
good
in a
one. You
meme.
got to give props
It,
where props is due.
it's
AOC's crazy, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, uh, I
yeah.
don't think she said that. I saw it in a meme. Don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Meme culture is also big part of the political spectrum now,
It really is. I know this sounds like a joke, but memes can actually make a big difference. Like
without a doubt.
again,
They can be a
Indeed.
I
checkmate.
know people are probably going to be laughing at this, calling me a fucking idiot, but I mean it's society, it's information spreading or misinformation, however you want to put it.
Johnny Depp, Amber Heard.
You mix comedy with political activism. It really can go a long way.
It's
Yeah.
just a
As
new
a
medium of providing information. It's the pamphleteering of today,
It
but I
it's
wish we would go back to pamphleteering to build off the theme that we talked about in the last podcast, that the complexity of our civil discourse has gone inexorably downward from the George Washington's farewell address, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, or any of the documents that were penned around that time. They're written at college level, or spoken at college level, and now, well, look at Twitter. Need I say more? I don't think I do.
I mean really it's pretty clear with the generations that we have today coming into the adult world, being able to vote, being able to be activists. You take a small, this generation, it can only take TikTok videos, 5-second clips, our attention span. You take a picture with a funny joke on it, a funny picture, you put in something that somebody agrees with or something that they can ride with. That's a good way to win this generation over. It's quick, it's easy, it's simple. And when you think about it, that really can go a long way.
I'm agnostic on tactics. If it works, it works. But if I had my ultimate choice, I would rather elevate political discourse to a higher level. But if memes get votes, if memes change minds, if this is how we win hearts and minds, so to speak, let the memes flow. And I will say I am very guilty of this. My phone has about 3,000 memes on it. I like them
Amen.
too.
Amen. I mean, yeah, it would be an ideal world for politics to be held to a higher standard, but it all comes down to the people and the votes and however they spread information, however they win over votes for their political party or candidate. That's just how it goes, for better or worse.
look,
Indeed.
a meme is a custom postcard sent within seconds. It's a subliminal, subconscious vision, like a tarot card. It's a funny joke. It's a movie without, motion. It tells a story. It's a picture is 1,000 words. Okay, slap 10 more words on that. Are those really 10 more words, or is the weight of those words really more than just one per one word? And I think that's what we're handling when we're talking about memes and why they've been so politically charged and why politics have taken so much interest in memes.
Who
Right.
knows? Maybe Howard Stern might actually be getting somewhere, God forbid. But, I mean, the great meme war of 2016, that's why that became a meme in and of itself.
Indeed. This memes are now such a serious thing that a few months ago I read a book called Like War, which was written by some journalist who studies military and political affairs. And in this book, he's talking about how memes impacted quantifiably the 2016 election, and how memes and social media cyber warfare is physically impacting wars in the Middle East and around the world. So,
It affected our careers.
yes, as memes, their power is not under dispute anymore. Or when you have the military and the historical political environment writing whole books about them,
Yes.
we can be certain that this is a very potent force. This is another form of war. This is a
Yes.
memetic war. This is a
Yes.
concept. This is a thing. This exists. You have to
It's
adapt.
very, yeah, it's way more intense than we actually think. I mean, all three of us, we've fell victim to some of this.
Oh, definitely. I've
So,
got more memes than I'd care to admit in my phone. Most of them in some way tied into politics.
well, I was talking about our personal lives.
Yeah,
The
that
the
too.
memes,
Hell, I mean,
even memes have affected our own personal life.
oh yeah, absolutely. Hell, my brother and I were talking about this just the other day. I can't in any way specify it, but there was a meme that went around that actually influenced a local election in my hometown. I don't know any other
Wow.
con. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. See, that's the type of stuff I'm talking about. It affects people's lives.
So the midterms are roughly a month away, a month and about 4 days as of this recording. And do y'all think that the Republicans are losing momentum with quote unquote legislative successes coming from the Democrats lately, or do y'all believe that it'll still be a landslide? Because historically, the holding party of the White House, uh, it almost always does poorly in the midterms.
Right. There's
Right.
no way that the Republicans aren't going to pick up quite a lot of seats over this one. Because if we can make this about Biden, if this is going to be a referendum on who's at the top of the ticket, and Biden isn't running this year, but American politics have metamorphosized so much that power has flowed away from Congress towards the executive branch that the chief executive magistrate is now the ultimate personification of not just the party, but the ideology and all of the tens of millions of people who voted for him. Become a superhuman avatar, if you will. So Biden is the Democratic Party right now. However much that makes certain people in the Democratic Party scream and shriek with rage, he is. And if we can drive home to the voters that Biden is the Democratic Party, if you vote for the Democratic Party right now, you're also voting for Biden by proxy. Then
Right.
Biden is going to lose, which is to say, the Democratic Party is going to lose in the midterms. And I expect the Republicans to pick up quite a lot of seats.
Right. And as many Republicans have said in Congress, when they win, they are going to launch an investigation into Biden for corruption. I don't know any specifics on it. I would assume that it would in some way be involved with the Hunter Biden laptop deal. But needless to say, when, likely, not if, the Republicans gain many, many seats, Biden will be in some hot water.
It'd be very, very interesting to see how the media responds if what you say is and comes intuition. Um, I would say because of the legislative gains that the Republican Party has made, especially through the judicial branch, as far as abortion has come, I do think that has made some people probably that were independents might vote a little bit left, but at the end of the day, those type of people that are not hardcore about any of that stuff are not going to go out and vote anyways. So I think um, the voters saw it as a huge success. The majority of America is still anti-abortion. Um, so I say there is no way the Republican Party is going to lose this midterm. Um, again, because Tusk, you said, um, historically speaking, right, that the president's party almost always loses. So I want to say that pride comes before the fall, but seems to be an obvious prediction. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, we'll see how many left. It would be very interesting to see how many left wing voters
Right.
go out there and vote.
I would say that the majority of America, actually, according to many polls, the majority of America is, for the most part, pro choice, at least in many circumstances. However, I don't think that abortion is going to influence the midterms as much as many people say it will. because there are many, many other issues that many Americans hold to a higher priority, such as especially in southern states, border states, immigration, the economy, possible corruption of in many aspects, but for the most part, law enforcement, especially as of recently. I don't
Right.
think that abortion, especially with it being left up to the states, I think
And
that
is it something?
it could slightly influence a few gubernatorial elections, but for the most part, especially in all with states that already have Republican governors, which I believe there are 28 states with Republican governors right now. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what I've heard. I think that for the most part, pro-life people will stay pro-life, and pro-choice Americans, many of them might have higher priorities to worry about.
One of the things that you see with the abortion debate that really shows how much we've metamorphosized on this issue is that the media isn't talking about abortion much anymore. They just let it go. And
Right.
remember how big the firestorm was once it was repealed, but the firestorm burned itself out. What does that
Right.
mean? It means the Overton window, the range of acceptable opinions again, has shifted. It's now socially okay to be much more conservative on the abortion question than was previously acceptable. I guess we can come out of the woodwork, so to speak.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
now, now the left is just accepting that. The media is just accepting that times have changed and they just take their L's when another state bans abortion, or like Arizona just held that they could enforce an old territorial law that bans abortion in almost all cases, making it punishable by felony.
Right.
Did this create a huge firestorm? No. Would it have a year ago? Yes, the whole nation would have been on fire. But now, the media, the left, they're just taking their L's and going home. This is a very positive sign that the mood of the whole country has shifted dramatically in our direction.
Right.
And if
And
there is a whole firestorm about this in the midterms, then we can safely say we're in the clear and that we can continue restricting abortion.
I think it's safe to say, as far as voters go, um, that the majority of voters are actually more pro-life. Now, if you were to go and walk out on the street, and the Overton window, like Marquis is saying, makes a huge difference, because when it comes to social pressure, and especially when it comes to a situation like abortion being and women in general, as far as how we treat women in our society and all these sensitive type topics, you know, no one wants to offend anybody, but it goes back to, is this something that people are willing to vote for? And are they willing to vote? Are they ride or die for abortion? Like some women are. And a lot of people want to be sympathetic, but when it comes to voters, most voters are pro-life, and because they want to make sure that the nation stays pro-life, and they will do anything to keep it pro-life.
Right. The
Polls
polls
have shown that most people are indeed pro life in this country.
really.
Yeah, I
I,
believe Gallup has done that.
right. I've read the opposite, from different
I've
sources. I've read, but
It
I
depends on
think
where you live,
true.
social circumstances, and then also the Overton window.
Try true.
Absolutely.
I believe maybe the difference could be more people might identify as more pro-choice. However, from my experience, and I have nothing to back this up, do not quote me on this, but from what I've seen, I believe that there are more pro-lifers who are very, very passionate about the topic than pro-choicers and are more likely to vote on that. Obviously, there are some people who are very, very passionate about being pro-choice and supporting abortion. However,
Well,
it
it's a
differs from
minority.
Yeah,
Who,
perhaps, but
who's yeah, who's
pro-lifers, an important thing to remember is pro-lifers believe that millions of children are being murdered, and
right?
pro-choicers believe that women's
It's
rights are being,
moral.
but pro-choicers believe that women's rights are being restricted. Again, that's a huge injustice, but it's not as passionate of a viewpoint as children being ripped limb from limb every single hour, minute, whatever it is.
Yeah,
So,
and then that's when we come back to humans. They want their extremes, right? They say it's, death, it's murder, and then some people are like, look, I should have an abortion the day the baby's being born. Now, how many people are radically actually about that? That's a strong minority.
true.
When
Even
I
most
say strong
pro-choicers.
minority, a vocal strong minority. It doesn't take much to change anything. It only takes 1% to change a nation. You
That's
know
true.
that through the Revolutionary War.
Absolutely.
But I do want to say that you're right. You have a great point that it is the pro-lifers that are very strong about it. I mean, the people that are pro-choice, they're strong about it because they've either had an abortion or they've had somebody close to them that's had an abortion. That's typically what it is. Either that or you're a teen girl that's, looking out for trying to look out for other teen girls. You're trying to be moral and trying to be a good person. And that's your way and it comes to semantics on your outlook on life. But it's a minority, but it is a very vocal minority. And I think that's why a lot of people could see it going the other way. Plus the people that are kind of indifferent and within conversation tend to say pro-choice because they don't want to offend anybody.
Right. And abortion has always been my least favorite political topic to talk about, but I guess the painful shit to talk about is the most important shit to bring up because you have one side, women's bodies are being controlled and restricted, and then you have the other side, children are being murdered. I mean,
That's how it came.
that is a
That's the
very
narrative.
big issue to discuss.
Right.
And the reason that I hate the topic so much is because it's less a political topic and more or less a philosophical topic. You know, when does life begin? Well, when life begins, is it inherently valuable? Is an unborn
Right.
child worth the same as a child that's already been born? If it's not, where do you draw the line? If you believe that it's not valuable until it's born, well, should it be able to be killed 5 minutes before it's born? The majority of pro-choicers say no. Even pro-choicers don't believe it should be allowed in the third trimester. And there are just so many different issues that you have to discuss. It's a very difficult issue to make progress into finding a higher common ground. I've always hated the topic, but it is a very important topic to discuss, which is quite surprising how, like you said earlier, Marquis, the discussion is kind of dying down. Obviously, the overturning of Roe v. Wade was extremely controversial, but it's not, honestly, in my opinion, it hasn't caused as much of an uproar as I was expecting.
Indeed, there. It's just that it's just the Overton window has shifted, and when you get right down to it, the radical pro-choice crowd is an extremely vocal minority, like Picasso said, and a lot of it is I would chalk up to rationalization of their actions or actions of people that are very close to them. They're trying to justify something that I would wager a lot of them know deep down is something deeply immoral. And that's where the perverse passion comes from. It's a raging, a screaming, a shrieking and roaring and gnashing of teeth against nature and the inner feeling of right and justice within the soul of man that they're constantly fighting because they want
Oh,
to do something, but it's just at odds with something deep within them.
we
There's the
can
passion.
I think Tusk brought up a great point as far as it comes down to philosophy. And I think it's very important if you're going to be if you're going to be political about anything or to form an opinion, to be very educated when it comes to philosophy, because a philosophy comes down to your very viewpoint of life itself and existence and what that means to you and what that is for meaning and what your responsibility is and what's your goal in life. And a lot of that has to come down to philosophy. And what we're seeing is humans are viewing humans very differently.
Right.
Very
Indeed.
different.
It's a huge discussion on, they say a woman's right to choose over her body as opposed to a
On
child's right to
everything.
life.
On
And
everything.
exactly. And when does a child's right to life, obviously, we say everyone has a right to live. Well,
Right.
in certain cases, people have the right to defend themselves against a home intruder. Somebody breaks into your home, at least in certain states. You have the right to end their life. And many pro choicers use this argument. If a child is growing inside a woman's body, she has the right to kill. And then pro lifers say, well, that's a choice that you made. You can't invite someone into your house and then shoot them for coming in.
We're avoiding a very important word, even though we've mentioned philosophy already. And since we're on the topic of abortion, and that is religion, because religion is a type of philosophy.
That's
And
true.
I mean, you could see the division even within the political parties. Of the Republicans tend to be more of that conservative Bible thumper, and the Democrats tend to not be as religious, right? So, and this comes down to another big court case, right? On evolution. What was the trial called?
The Scopes
Um,
monkey trial.
the Scopes monkey trial. That trial has to come down to how humans are viewing other humans. Do we view ourselves as monkeys? Do we view ourselves as a as an individual created by God higher than angels? I mean,
Right.
how are we viewing ourselves? That
That's
we're
true.
constantly debating.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always try to avoid using religion and politics, but there does come a point where, I mean,
They merge.
religion, where whatever you believe, religion does incorporate itself into our lives, and it does in many ways. It is a type of philosophy, and arguably, whether you believe it or not, it is the most widespread and important philosophy in a sense where, even many non-believers, many atheists say that they are in a sense spiritual. Hell, I know a celebrity, Corey Taylor, the lead singer of Slipknot. He's an atheist, but he still believes in an afterlife. He believes in ghosts specifically. He believes that, in his words, the energy from your soul, I'm not sure what exactly he believes a soul is, continues to move into a spiritual realm of this world and can, at certain points, phase themselves into being faintly visible by humans. Religion and spirituality heavily influences the way that we see the world, whether you believe in a God or not.
Indeed. I often
And
get back to a quotation. I believe this was from Sir Isaac Newton, but of course I may be incorrect. That the first gulp of science will make any man into an atheist, but the bottom of your glass, God will be waiting for you.
That's
that's
The
a
pretty
great
natural
one.
science,
that's pretty deep.
yes, the natural sciences, physics, when you astronomy, biology, at a very superficial level, it all seems to be something that's inherently atheistic. But when you study it in great depth and truly look at it, complexity of life, the size of the universe, and how quickly it supposedly came into being. Well, what does the Big Bang sound like? Whole universe coming into glorious life in a split second with an uncomprehendable amount of energy. Well, that sounds like Genesis to me, to be perfectly honest. It sounds like you've just proven Genesis.
Right.
I digress.
I
Yeah,
once
and
Science, I will always contend, will point towards God at the very end. because only a creator of unthinkable complexity and genius could come up with something so perfect, so detailed, so wonderful. Look at the grass, at the sky. You will see him. There's a scripture, something to that effect, but I can't
Yeah, I
quote it.
mean, there's between scientists and uh religious people, there's been a big split within that. I mean, and I think a lot of you can even see within Christianity now, a lot of Christians are taking up science and because it used to be if you were a science man, you're an anti-religious man.
You don't
And
have.
now I see it more often than not now just through the internet that a lot of Christians are becoming more scientific and they're becoming more what is the word? Sophisticated and the reasoning for a higher power. You need religion, you need philosophy, and both of those tie directly to politics because politics is what represents somebody. It's supposed to be a part of your life. And it's like, hey, this is for my community. This is what I want my nation to be. Um, and that's what a book is, that's what the Bible is, and that's what philosophy was. So, political science, now we're talking about political science, but science, being in politics, you can't really derive anything from those without some sort of religion or philosophy.
Indeed. I would like to say also that this world is infinitely corrupted, and I would much rather base my ideas and my life around he who is greater than the world than he who is in the world. And
Right.
all
Right.
that which the world has built, all those false edifices of varying strength, but I would prefer to build something on bedrock instead of sand,
Yeah,
i.e.,
if
Christ, i.e., the gospel.
yeah,
That's my
if
story, and I'm sticking to it.
yeah, if
Okay.
humans are the most intelligent and powerful beings in the known universe, then we're all fucked.
Indeed.
Well, yeah, every human needs to have a moral compass. It's try to do an experiment on yourself. You can't move without being moral, without having a conscience. So it's very important on how you conduct yourself every day and what your moral responsibility is to the universe or to God. If you don't believe it, test it out. That's what I always say. Ain't that right, Marquis?
Indeed.
Yeah, we got pretty deep there. We definitely covered a lot of topics today.
I was just the surface.
We can't be
Yeah.
afraid of the hard topics. We
No, we
can't be
can't.
we can't be afraid of diving deeper.
Yeah. I like that.
Absolutely.
But this
I
was
I like
definitely
that we hit all of it. We hit all of it plus some.
yeah, we definitely got off to a great start here and we can see where this goes and where this journey takes us.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
I think that about wraps us up for tonight. Thank you both very much for joining me.
Thank you, Tusk. Thank you, Picasso.
Right.
Thank you, Tusk. Thank you, Marquis. So been awesome. I loved the whole thing.
And I'll see you all later. Good night.